we also have a division of our company that sells floor plans, right? People love, the floor plan. They see a picture posted and they're like, we want to build this. And, so we've decided, hey, let's make these widely available.
Yep.
And so we sell floor plans, and any builder that's worth the salt can use those plans to construct that house. Doesn't mean that the county isn't going to require some type of engineering. Again, we talked about this earlier was, not everywhere requires engineering. Matter of fact, most doesn't across the country. But where they do, there's a lot of things that go into this. And I think people have a misperception here or a misconception about what engineering is. And so they think, they hear the term engineered stamp. These are engineered stamp trusses. These are engineered stamp plans. And then you have the PEMBs that are like, these are pre-engineered metal buildings, and so they're engineered to withstand certain things. But when you're talking about building a home and you purchase a plan from us, we offer engineering services, right? But there's a lot of intake information that goes into that, and it's an additional expense. There's a lot of things that are factored into this type of engineering. Where are you building it? What materials are you using? Who's your builder? He may not build the way that we build. So for me to engineer it to my specifications would be crazy and a giant waste of your money, time, and resources. If you've hired a builder that doesn't build this way, or doesn't have the ability to build this way. And so we deal with that all the time. I think there's a huge just misunderstanding of what hearing engineer stamps are.
Yeah.
So like we have people that'll order, and it's not everybody, out of thousands of plans that are sold, it's a handful that'll be like, well, these don't even have a stamp on them. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Elaborate a little bit more. So what we just talked about kind of lends itself to that. Like all these variables to engineering, wood versus steel versus, the bolt together red iron units versus weld up units versus stick built conventional style framing, which truly, when they say stick built, it's not even stick built because they're pre-engineered trusses a lot of times. And, so like with all of this going on, elaborate a little bit more on engineering and what people's expectations should be when it comes to getting an engineered letter or an engineered approval for your particular municipality.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's start off with first of all with the floor plans, because we have an in-house drafting team and we do custom floor plans for people too. Now, floor plans that do not show the actual pieces of how it is put together and how the members are spaced and what all the connections are, and don't have snow loads and wind loads and seismic loads factored in. They're pretty pictures. They show where the rooms are. They give you the layout and the flow, and there's some guys that they'll do 3D, renditions for you, whatever. Those are non-structural. It is unlawful for an engineer to put their seal on a non-structural plan. It'd be like having an engineer take your toilet roll dispenser and have a picture of that toilet roll dispenser and stamp it.
Yeah.
Well, he can't do that. Or she can't do that. That is unlawful because that is outside of their scope. Now, an architect could seal those plans, but rarely. I mean, and I went to school to be an architect, so I'm not trying to shoot holes in people in the profession I started in, but rarely is an architect required by a jurisdiction to create a floor plan and elevation drawings for a building. It's a service. It is not the structural portion of it. The structural portion is a whole nother ballgame, and done right, it is very complex. Post-frame buildings, as simple as they may look, they are very complex structures. Even that little garage that you may build that's post-frame, it has thousands of components in it. A two-car garage, I can run you a set of our calculations out for that building, and chances are it's somewhere around 150 pages. But it covers everything. I mean, it covers the transferring of every load throughout that building. I had the first commercial building I built for myself was my truss plant in Spokane 30 some odd years ago. And as part of that, I had to have an engineered site plan. Now, I didn't understand going into it what was involved in that engineered site plan, but that engineer had to account for every drop of rain that would fall on that property and where the rain went, and you had to contain it within your space. Well, a structural plan for a building is the same way. It has to be able to show that you followed what's called a load path from any direction that wind or snow or seismic forces touch that building, and how those forces get transferred through the members down to the ground, because the ground is static. It doesn't move unless you have an earthquake, but you can account for that. But those loads have to be transferred to the ground. You just can't have a piece that ends somewhere without load being transferred out, because that load exists. So an engineer that is worth his or her salt, they've got, in our case, I mean, we designed our own proprietary program for it because we couldn't buy one that would do all those things. But there's a lot of work involved in that, and your building is only going to be as strong as that weakest point. I had a client in Walla Walla, Washington several years ago, and he had this idea. He had to have, Walla Walla has very little snow, had to have 2x8 roof purlins on his building because he was, convinced that that's what it was going to take to carry the load. I said, okay, those 2x8 purlins, that's great. So what happens when the rest of your building falls apart underneath those purlins? Did it really make a difference? No, it really didn't. So, from an engineering standpoint, people don't understand that, first of all, if you're in a jurisdiction that requires a permit, which it blew me away when I found out that there are lots of places that don't. I came from the West where you got, you need a structural permit for your doghouse pretty much. Yep. I could hardly fathom that, but,
and there's a lot of places where to be a builder, you just need a business card.
or a napkin.
Yeah. There's not even a license process. Yeah. But go ahead.
So when your jurisdiction gives you a set of loads for your building, those are the minimum requirements. That is the least that they possibly will allow. And those minimum requirements are for residential are based on a once in 50-year occurrence. They will be exceeded. That doesn't mean that, in 50 years, it might not happen at all. It could happen the year after that building is put up. And the idea behind the building codes, it's fire, life, safety. What's going to keep you from dying in the event of that catastrophic event? It doesn't mean that the building is necessarily even going to stand up. It just means that you'll be able to survive it. Your building may lean, 15 degrees out of plumb. The roof may have been sucked off it. One wall could be gone. But if you lived, then you met the success of the building codes. So I always encourage people, and I try to encourage our team, and I know it doesn't happen nearly enough, but look at, what's it going to cost to increase that, that snow load if you're in snow country, or the design wind speed if you're in somewhere where wind is going to be the dictate. Oftentimes it is very, very small, rather than saying, well, I think I need to have an 8x8 column, or I need my roof trusses built out of 2x12s, or whatever you have picked in there, rather than pick one thing that may or may not influence it, is go for that total package that assures you that all the connections and all the components are engineered adequately to meet a given set of wind or snow or seismic circumstances, whatever it may be. So but there's a lot involved in this, and people they do not, for the most part, grasp it. And builders even less grasp it. Yep. I've run across builders that they'll tell me, my daddy built them this way, and we've built them this way, and we've been doing it for 40 years, and we're just going to keep on doing it that way. Well, that's all great and wonderful. Every 3 years, there's a new version of the building codes that comes out. And as technology improves, we're better able to understand how especially wind forces work on buildings and certain portions of buildings, and it changes. And so that guy that's been building it the same way for 40 years, unless they just overkilled it to beat the band 40 years ago, they're in trouble.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in to the Barndo Show podcast. If you're watching on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this content, hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And then be sure to check us out on all of our social media platforms at the Barndo Co. Super simple to find us. And then when you're ready to dive in a little more, maybe look around some of our available floor plan options, or take a look at the gallery of our work, or maybe you're ready to connect with our team and explore what it looks like to build your dream barndominium, you can visit us online at thebarndoco.com.